Let's have a look at one of my favorite Linux bash commands, Xargs. Okay, let's take a directory listing. There's various files here, a file called echo, a file called test, a directory, some more directories. What would happen if we sent the output from this directory listing into echo? Okay, so it's taken all of this output and sent it into echo. Now it's not really readable this way because it's just clunked everything together. But we can use a certain option, uppercase I, with Xargs to specify that we want to replace the underscore with each line of input. And now it's going to handle each line of input separately, which is very handy. Okay, great. So basically we've taken a directory listing, sent it into Xargs, which basically is going to execute whatever command is given after it. With as option whatever input was given, line per line, and we get a nice output. Of course we could have just typed ls-l to start with, but gives an example of Xargs use. It's better to use curly brackets instead of something like underscore or some other character, simply because of some parsing issues. And my colleague David has informed me that there are some parsing issues with using anything else than this. It's very good, so we can use this one instead. Now, let's have a think about what we could do. We copy test to test2, oops, test to test3 to test4, and we now have several files. We can take a directory listing, and we want to print the 9 column, and we want to grab anything that has 2 or 3 in it. Of course, there are also other ways of going about this. We could have simply gone test2 3. Okay, even though they're on one line, Xargs understands that these are separate files. We can remove them. Let's see if this works. And sure enough, our files are gone. So we've basically just sent the input from this ls command into the remove command. Let's make some directories. So we have 3 directories, and let's try something similar. Now here we're getting the output of these directories, the contents per directory. That's not really what we want, so we want to specify we only want to see the directories. Great. Of course we don't want all the other information, so just the directories. Now, will this work? Sure, it works too. So we've recursively deleted each of the directories 1, 2, 3. This is another use of Xargs, where you're taking some text-based input and process it further. Now what if we have some files? Let us copy test to test1. So we have 3 test files there. Let's have a look what's inside them. We're getting each one of them here. What if we have some files and we want to get them? Will this work? No, it doesn't. Why not? Well, if we display the output of test here, which will be this, and then redirect it to cat, what cat is trying to do, it's actually trying to cat these files, but they don't exist. So how about if we wanted to simply output whatever was there? Let's try echo again. And it works, but again it's not very clean, and as we've seen we can clean that up by doing this. Now if we wanted to prefix this, we could say test, and that works fine. But what about if we wanted to prefix them and then yet do another echo command? Will this work? It will not. What has happened here is that this command terminator has terminated all of this, and here's a new command, so the new command executes. That's not really what we wanted. A very handy tip to know is that we can run sh-c and specify what it is we want to run as a total. In fact, we're starting a subshell here, which we'll see a bit more about in the next part, but for the moment it's handy to know that this is possible. Now, let's have a look at the output here. So, we echo test what our replacement, which is of course the output that we're getting from the get of each file, and prefix by test, and then a second command executed, just showing this thing. To make this a bit clearer, we could say the first, the second, and it specifies those nicely. To know this is to have a lot of power, because very often we have some sort of input list, whether it's directory listing output or whether it's a file or something like that, and then we want to do a one-liner command. We want to write everything on one line of multiple steps for each of those. For instance, we might start a test case reduction for each of those, and afterwards we want to copy that test case somewhere, etc, etc, etc. So this way, by starting a subshell in this way, there's some other ways that don't work, but in this way, sh, a shell, minus c, which means the command that follows, we encapsulate that command, and just be careful not to use these throughout, and then we execute a certain command. Okay, so let's have a look at showing this again in some other way. What we're going to do here is we're going to ask a directory listing, and we're going to drop out -v. We're going to remove anything that's a directory, and we're going to print the file name. Now all this is a long way of going about things, but just to show the power of piping and how we can combine various things. We're also going to eliminate any empty lines. Great, so we have a listing of our files, which comes more or less directly from here. And what we're going to do with each of those files is we're going to start a subshell, and we're going to list the details of each of those files again. There we go. So you can see how powerful this is. You can work various bash tools, Linux tools. You can combine them in various ways, pipe them, redirect them, do all sorts of things with them, and make very powerful one-line or multiple line statements. While we're using Xargs, let's also have a look at another example. How about if we have a list of numbers and we want to execute, let's call it number. For instance, we have some script variable, some script directory. Let's call it script here. And we want to delete a trial. A trial might be like a QA test, for example, number. So now we pass all the numbers that are in the number.txt file into Xargs, and Xargs will start a particular script with as option, the first option, the number that was stored one after the other in the numbers file. What will this do? Well, let me just cancel out of this with Ctrl+C. So it will start a delete trial with, what it will do is something like this, 1, and then the next time it will do 2, and so on. Inside the script, and this goes a little bit into scripting already, we could use S1 or $1, which is the first option. So let us test this. We'll make a shell script and we say just simply display the first option that was given to me. You'll remember that we have to make it executable, and we'll just execute it. There's no option passed. Okay, so this works. We're using the $1 to get a clear ID of whatever it is we're inputting to the script. So now we'll make our number file. We have our number file, and we're going to get this again, and we're going to send the output to Xargs, and we're going to run that test.sh script, and we're going to send number. Now, just to do this cleaner as we've learned before, we'll just use the curly brackets. Great. So how do we make sure that we're actually looking at output here? Well, we could say, there we go. Compare this with each other. How else could we use Xargs? Well, let's say that we have some sleep processes, and by the way, sleep you can run like 1/10 of a second, half a second, 1 second, and so on. Let's run a few very long sleeps. And you can see all the processes there. As we've learned, these are background processes, and we can run FG and go to the last background process and make it foreground, but we don't want to do that because we will lose our prompt. Or let's just do 1 and then we Control C out of it, and so now this final process is terminated because we've ended it. Now, so we have our sleeps here. Let's have a look at the process list, the full process list, and grab any sleeps that we can see. Of course, we again need to filter out the grep that is running at the time of the PS as well. And we have our sleeps. We can print the process ID, the second column, by using awk, as we've learned as well. And we can send this to Xargs. We can even use sudo if we want. In this case it will not be necessary because they are our own processes, but let's say that we want to make sure that if there's any processes owned by another user that we kill those too. And so we're going to kill them off, and I don't really want output of this at all, whether it fails or succeeds, and any error output is going to be redirected to the standard input, which is def null, so in other words there will be no output at all. It would have been the same if we did this. Okay, so we still have a bit of output, and this might be because we're running through sudo. Let me just have a think about this. Yeah, possibly. Let's have a little play and see if we can find the reason. We might not, but it doesn't hurt to try. No, it still outputs it, so there must be some way. I know why. It's because we've started them in a background, and it's actually the background process here reporting back to us. So let's see if we can do this. It might not work, as it might be actually the manager of the processes that is reporting, but we will see. This time we're doing the redirection the other way around, which is fine as well. I've got a feeling that it will not work because, as you can see here, the task manager, if you will, is reporting the processes back, and so the process that is reporting these back would be a different process as the actual process of the sleep itself. So even though we had some fun, we will still see the output. Probably there's a way of hiding this, maybe by making a more internal OS change. Okay, that's about all I wanted to show you on Xargs for the moment. Have a look on the online and maybe in the manual. You'll find a lot more interesting information. As you can see, there's quite a number of options that you can play around with, and that make Xargs even more powerful than what was already shown. Just as a little bit of a tidbit on the side, something that I might have forgotten before, I want to show you what echo E does. Echo -E interprets the new line correctly. This is handy if you have a script and you want to have a new line interpreted. For instance, you could do test, new line test. In this case it will not be interpreted, and so it's just a literal output. Here we have the interpretation and it's a nice output. Similarly, we can use N, which means no new line, and you can see there's test, but there's no new line behind it. I wonder what it does when I do something like this. Yes, as expected, there's no new line behind it, but we have said interpret new lines and we've passed a manual new line. And thereby we get the same as just a simple straightforward test. Okay, that's it. Hope to see you in the next one.